Hi, today we're going to make a dialogue speech bubble in Godot. You might see this in some Nintendo games. It'll be animated with the typewriter text effect, and it'll appear in the world space above a character. However, the code that we create will be reusable for something like a static text box that you might see in an RPG. In this scene, we just have a simple character, and once we're finished creating our speech bubble, we'll attach it to this character and use it to display a speech bubble. So let's start by creating our speech bubble scene hierarchy. I'll add a node2d under this. We'll call anchor. It'll be used to move the text around later. Underneath this, we're going to add a rich text label, and we're going to configure that. So a few things that we want to do. We want to disable the scroll so no scroll bars show up. We want to enable the BB code text. So this will be useful if we want to add custom special tags to make the text more interesting. Then we want to go into the custom fonts, check mark this normal font, select new dynamic font, drop down, select new dynamic font data, and then we'll select font path, and we'll select the font that we have in our project. Now we'll need to configure some things that are custom to our font. So in this font in particular, there needs to be extra space between for each space character, just so the words aren't smooshed together. We'll also set the size of the text much larger so that it's easily visible. And then we're going to set the custom color to the default color, just to make sure it's set correctly. Alright, next we're going to add a color rect, which we'll use as the background for the text so that it doesn't get lost in the noise of your game and it's very clear to the players. And we're going to add two more nodes that we'll use for animating the text. The timer node is going to be used to leave the text on the screen for a certain amount of time after it's done animating so that players can read it. And we'll set this timer to 1 shot. And then we'll create a tween node, and the tween node will be used to animate the text. We're going to save this scene as speech bubble, and we're going to create a speech bubble script. We'll save this real quick. So to start, we're going to want to get some convenience variables set up at the top. So we will start by getting the color rect and the rich text label into these variables. Okay. Next, we probably don't want the speech bubble to be visible when we start the scene, so we'll just set this to false. We'll only want it to be visible when somebody intentionally passes a text. So after that, we're going to create a function that can be called from anywhere in your scripts where you can pass text to this speech bubble. So we're going to set it's going to be called setText, and we'll pass it two arguments: the text that we want to display and the wait time, the amount of time that the text will be displayed on the screen after it finishes animating. So by default, we're going to set this to 3 seconds. That's a good number I've found. So next, we'll do the most straightforward stuff. So we'll set visible to true, and we'll get the timer and set the wait time to the wait time we passed into the function. And for now, just to make sure that everything is where we want it, we'll make sure the timer is stopped, because you might call this function after you've already started another text event, and we want to make sure that that text event is completely ended when we call this function again. So next, we're going to take our text node, the rich text label that we created, and we're going to set the BB code text to text. Okay. So after that, what we want to do is we want to tween the text we want to set up the animations for the text. So we will take our tween node, we will remove all current tweens, and then we're going to interpolate a few properties. So the first property is going to be on the text node, and if you look in the inspector here, you can see there's this variable right here called %visible, and it defaults to 1. It goes between 0 and 1, which is really nice, and it determines how many characters in the text that you set are visible on the screen, are displayed by the text node. So that's the property we want to use. So it's going to go from 0 to 1, and the duration we will set to duration, which we haven't defined yet. And then we will do tween start. So now let's look on the duration. So the duration is going to be determined by the number of characters that we set up, because we want each character to be on the screen for a certain amount of time before the next character to create this kind of typewriter effect. So the way we get the number of characters is not through this variable that was passed in, because that variable could have BB code text tags in it. So for example, if we call this the tags for color are not actually going to be rendered. They're going to be interpreted by the BB code text renderer, and it'll make world in between them red. So we don't want to count those in the time it takes to interpolate between %visible 0 and %visible 1. So we will set, we can use the text node.text, which will remove the tags when we set it here. And then we want to get the length of that, and we want to multiply this by some constant. So usually you don't want to put magic numbers in your code, so we'll define that up here at the top as the char time and 0.02. So that's a good number I've found. You can adjust that as you feel needed. And that will be the text time, or the duration is what I called it. So that will be the duration it takes to interpolate all these characters. All right. So there's a few more things we need to do. So we still need the text to remain on screen for a certain amount of time after it finishes interpolating. So we're going to do two things. We're going to link the tween complete all, and we're going to link the timeout on the timer. And then in the tween completed all, we'll start the timer. And in the timeout, we're going to set visible to false so that the text disappears. Okay, so now we can test our scene. We've passed in this text, and it should be hello world with red, and we'll see what happens. So you see the text is all cut off. It's really small. That's pretty easily explained though. The control nodes have a margin and an anchor for how big they can be. So basically what we need to do is we need to set those all properly. And we don't know how big the text is, so we'll need to do it mostly programmatically. There's a few things we can do before that though. So we know how tall the text is relatively, so I'm just going to set the bottom margin to 48, and for now I will set the right margin to 0 since we don't know how big it will be, and I'll do that for both the rich text label and the color rect label. Then in our script we want to get the text size. And we want to set the size of the speech bubble, and we're probably going to want to animate that as well. So the way that we get the size of the text is by getting the font that we are using, which is called normal font in this case. And we'll use this function get string size. And we know how to get the text without the tags, without the BB code tags. So we'll do text node dot text like that. And this will give us our text size. So now with our text size, what we can do is we can set a few properties. So we can set the text node margin right to text size x, and we can set our text bg margin right to text size x. And that's a pretty easy solution. You can see now everything works correctly, but it doesn't look so great. I'll run that one more time. So you can see at the very top there's no margin, no padding. So we want to correct those things. So the way we do that is in the rich text label, we're going to set the left and top margin to 8 in this case. This will vary depending on your text size and your the font you're using. So it's just something you have to kind of tune in. And then in our code, we'll just define another constant. Set margin offset to 8. And we're going to add that to both of these. Looks a lot better now. So instead of just setting the overall size, what we want to do is we actually want to interpolate these values. So we'll add a few more of these. So we're going to interpolate the property on the text node of margin right, and we want it to go from 0 to text size.x. Oh, sorry. Actually, this one, since the actual size of the text isn't visible, we don't have to interpolate, but we do want to interpolate the text background. So this one will be margin right 0 to text size x plus margin offset and duration. Okay, so now we run that again, and you'll see it goes really fast. We can slow that down by modifying this. And the white background expands with the text. So let's do one more thing. You don't want the text to come in from the right side. So you'll see it always expands from this left to right. And so I can show you how this will look once we add it to the character. And we'll set the transform to -64, and we'll run it on this character. It kind of looks weird with it going out to the right of the character instead of staying over the character's head. So instead of doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to add another Tween interpolation. And this time it's going to be on the anchor node that we added. And we're going to interpolate the position of that anchor node. And that's going to be from vector to 0, the center, to the left. So we'll do vector 2, and we'll do text, negative text size, x divided by 2, 0. And then set the duration. All right. So next, we can test on our player, and you'll see it's directly over top of the player. And that is how you create a basic speech bubble dialogue over a player in the game. You can also use this interpolation method if you have a bigger static text box at the bottom of your RPG for dialogue between characters. This tween method works really well, but I like doing this kind of in-game text box over my characters' heads. So I hope this tutorial helps. I'll leave a link in the description to the source code. Thanks for watching. Bye.